You see him on the news.
CNN.com contributor, Dean Obeidallah. So, Dean...
Watch him at comedy clubs.
When I say Mecca, do you think of a holy place or an urban clothing line?
Read his articles. And you hear him on the radio. The Dean Obeidallah Show is on live right here on SiriusXM Progress, Channel 127.
And welcome to the show, brothers and sisters of the Resistance. It is Wednesday, January 9th. We're live for the next 3 hours. I am Dean Obeidallah. Hope to be your MBFF. On Twitter at Dean Obeidallah, Facebook.com/Dean of Radio, where you can watch if you so choose. In fact, in the second, third hour, we got guests in the studio. You can watch everything going on right there. So let's get into it. Donald Trump, we're not going to play any clips of his speech, but let me sum up his speech of 10 minutes of nothingness. Here really quick, we'll have a music, sort of like a music chorus that kind of sums up Donald Trump's speech. Here's clip number one. All right, I think you got it. Thompson twins, lies, 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 yeah. In fact, here was Jimmy Kimmel on his show, which he did live after the speech, and a really funny discussion about the speech. Here's clip number two, Jimmy Kimmel from last night.
Much of the debate in this case centered around whether or not it is appropriate to give the president a forum to lie to us on television. For real, this is the concern. So what they did, and I thought this was interesting because they've never done this before, each network decided they would run the speech, but with a disclaimer first.
The following presidential address is a work of fiction. All personalities, incidents, events, locations, and facts were pulled directly from the president's ass. Reality is entirely coincidental.
Some funny stuff. It's a work of fiction. It is. You know, there isn't, for me to play clips of Trump and go, he lied and lied and lied, is useless. We did play a game last night. Guess how many lies Donald Trump will tell? And I said I had to look at objective fact checkers. According to the New York Times, they had 2 false statements and a misleading. So that would be 3 lies and a bunch of out of context. I don't want to, we all know Trump lies all the time. There are a few things, though, just to make sure we all know the facts, that we are all smarter than those people Donald Trump lies to. And it's so unfortunate Trump is misleading good Americans, who I'm sure would want to know the truth. But they have someone they like very much, Donald Trump, and that's unfortunate they like him. But what's truly unfortunate is that he's taking advantage of you, Trump supporters, by lying to you. And then you're out there repeating his lies, not knowing the truth. So let's clarify a couple of quick things. I will play a clip or two of Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi's response, which I thought was nice. It was well done. And here's the funniest part. The preliminary TV ratings, I'm not kidding, and this is preliminary on network, that Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer got higher ratings than Donald Trump. It seemed people really didn't watch Trump, and they tuned in afterwards to watch Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi's like 5-minute thing. I'm not kidding. This is the preliminary numbers. We'll find out more tomorrow. A couple of quick things, and I just want to point these out because these are lies that are told by Trump to misinform good Americans. Even those I disagree with, you're still ultimately, hopefully a good American, right? First of all, he said, our southern border is a pipeline for vast quantities of illegal drugs, including meth, heroin, cocaine, and fentanyl. Every week, 300 of our citizens are killed by heroin alone, 90% of which floods from our southern border. Now, there are lies and out of context. Quick clarification here. Truth is, most heroin is smuggled into America through the southern border. Donald Trump left it like that, making you think it's through the unguarded areas of the southern border. That's where the lie comes in. The reality is, and this is the Drug Enforcement Administration, it's not a liberal think tank, it's part of the administration. Their National Drug Threat Assessment has made it very clear that the primary source of drugs into this country is not from the unguarded places in the desert. I mean, that means someone's taking heroin and going through the desert and risking their lives and thousands of dollars worth of product through the desert. They might not even make it. They might die without water. Who knows what happens to them? How does it come through? The ports of entry, where you drive right in with your car and your truck, because they can't search every vehicle. Why? Because they're understaffed. And bing, 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 that might light up something in your head going, they're understaffed. That seems like a curious thing. That seems like an easy fix without $25 billion for a wall. And we'll get into that in a few minutes. Exactly true. And secondly, Trump specifically said fentanyl. Fentanyl is synthetic drug. It does not come from the southern border at all. It comes from China. That's undisputed. It is mailed to us. And Trump has talked about it. In fact, he's called China out for that. But in his speech, he wanted to, of course, mislead you. Trump, another fact check. I think it's important to pull out here because a lot of people keep repeating it, that Chuck Schumer voted for this exact wall in 2006. That's not true. The reality is Chuck Schumer and 26 Democrats in 2006 voted for a law that authorized 700 miles of fencing along the southern border. The southern border is nearly 2,000 miles. During the 2016 campaign, Trump mocked that very 700 miles of fencing, saying it was nothing, not a wall at all, so it's not even close. He didn't vote for a wall like Donald Trump wants. Third thing, Trump said the wall will also be paid for indirectly by the great new trade deal we have with Mexico. Lie. Simply a lie. It's not part of the trade deal. It's not a line item in the trade deal. There's not even any suggestion, and I've begged media reporters to ask this, and I said it on Joy Reid's show Sunday, that I hope reporters would say to Donald Trump, you negotiated new NAFTA for 14 months. 14 months. Did your negotiators even one time in that 14-month period bring up funding for the wall and that Mexico would pay for it as part of new NAFTA? I think the answer is clearly no, because they would have said it. And if they said no to Trump, the man who demonized the Iran deal and said John Kerry and Obama should have walked away from it, then if they said no to Trump, why didn't he walk away from it? So that's a lie. Then here was the fear-mongering. Things that were factually correct, but out of context. He said in Maryland, MS-13 gang members who arrived in the United States as unaccompanied minors were arrested and charged last year after visually stabbing a 16-year-old girl. And he says, over the last several years, I've met with dozens of families whose loved ones were stolen by illegal immigration. So he has met with dozens of families whose loved ones were stolen by illegal immigration. I have no doubt that's probably true. Probably close to true. Two things here. Here's the reality. Native-born Americans commit far more crime than undocumented immigrants. And that's not my word. That's the Cato Institute, a right-leaning libertarian group in 2018. It's not a group, it's an institute. They examined criminal convictions in Texas and found, as a percentage of their respective populations, 56% fewer criminal convictions of illegal immigrants than native-born Americans. Another study in March 2018 of the Journal of Criminology found they looked at population levels of areas where there were high numbers of undocumented immigrants versus areas where there weren't. Do you think there was more crime in the areas of undocumented immigrants than where they were living? There was not. That's just not true. Here's the thing. Donald Trump has said in his own words, I've met with dozens of families whose loved ones were stolen by illegal immigration. He also went on to say, how much more American blood must we shed before Congress does its job? And that's a great question. How much more American blood must we shed before Congress, and I add, and Trump do their job? And what I mean by that is today, 30 Americans will die by gun violence. 30 of our fellow Americans will die by gun violence. Yesterday, 30 Americans died. Tomorrow, 30 Americans will die, including 5 to 8 children on average. So Trump may have met over the years with dozens of families. In a day, he can meet with a dozen families who have lost family members to gun violence. In 2 days, he can meet with dozens of families who have lost loved ones to gun violence. In fact, every day, nearly 90 Americans are killed involving guns, 30 by murder, about 60 by suicide. And you might say, well, what can you do about laws to reduce the number of suicides by gun? Well, clear studies have shown in states where there are waiting periods of 3 days, the suicide rate is lower because it makes all the sense in the world. Common sense. You're distraught. Things have not worked out. Something has pushed you to the point where you want to take your life. You have to go buy a gun. You go to the store. You can buy it. You go home. You commit a horrific act. You take your own life. Flash forward to another state. You have to wait 3 days. You go in to buy the gun. You apply for the gun. You have to wait 3 days to buy that gun. In that 3 days, perhaps something changed in your life. Perhaps you get the help you need. Perhaps loved ones have an intervention. Whatever it might be, common sense and studies have shown it is lower than the number of people who die every day. If Trump actually cared about American deaths, and I don't know what he cares about. I have no idea. Other than Trump, I don't know what he cares about. If you cared about Americans dying, why would you not address something that is taking 30 Americans' lives every day by murder and altogether 90 Americans' lives every day with guns? He won't. He won't. But you know what's amazing? What I just went through, the fact-checking, what's really remarkable is that Shep Smith on Fox News fact-checked Trump, but not this afternoon. Last night in prime time coverage, Fox News made a choice to have Shep Smith and Chris Wallace, two actual journalists, do the coverage. And I thought that was remarkable. And in the time between Trump speaking and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, here is Shep Smith to the Fox News audience without any pushback, fact-checking Trump and calling out his lies. This is stunning, folks. Let's hear clip number 3.
He made a number of claims there, speaking specifically about murder rates among those who are undocumented immigrants. The government statistics show that there is less violent crime by the undocumented immigrant population than by the general population. He called it a crisis of the heart and soul. He talked about drug crossings over the border, but government statistics show much of the heroin actually comes not over the unguarded border, but through ports of call. He talked about undocumented crossings over the past months. In fact, the number of undocumented crossings over the southern border has been steadily down over the last 10 years, and the government reports that there is more outward traffic than inward traffic. As for the trade deal he mentioned with Mexico, which he said would pay for the wall, that trade deal is not yet complete. And the president said that law enforcement professionals have requested the $5.7 billion. It's he who requested it, and it's he who said he would own the shutdown.
Is that unreal, folks? That was on primetime Fox News. That could have been on MS or CNN. And the only reason Trump did not, during that speech last night, say there are 4,000 terrorists who we caught coming over the border in the last year. Why didn't he say that? Because something else happened on Fox News. Here's Chris Wallace destroying Sarah Sanders on Sunday, making that. And that's the only reason we didn't hear that lie repeated last night. Here's clip number 4.
The president talks about terrorists potentially coming across the border. And here is Secretary of Homeland Security Nielsen. Take a look.
CBP has stopped over 3,000 what we call special interest aliens trying to come into the country on the southern border. Those are aliens who the intel community has identified are of concern.
But special interest aliens are just people who come from countries that have ever produced a terrorist. They're not terrorists themselves, and the State Department says that there is, quote, their words, no credible evidence of any terrorists coming across the border from Mexico.
We know that roughly nearly 4,000 known or suspected terrorists come into our country illegally. And we know that our most vulnerable point of entry is at our southern border.
I know this statistic. I didn't know if you were going to use it, but I studied up on this. Do you know where those 4,000 people come, or where they're captured? The airports.
Not always, but certainly a large number.
The State Department says there hasn't been any terrorists that they found coming across the southern border from Mexico.
It's by land.
That's unreal, folks. Look, I slam Fox News all the time, and they deserve it. But I have to be honest and praise them when they do good work, because they actually are reaching the people that I can never reach, that MS can never reach. They're reaching Trump supporters. And there was Chris Wallace on Sunday so decimated Sarah Sanders that Kellyanne Conway apologized the next day on Fox News, saying Sarah Sanders got the statistics wrong. That's the only reason Trump didn't repeat it. And Shep Smith last night telling the audience on Fox News, fact-checking Trump one thing after the other. You know, we got Tucker Klansman, you got Fox and White friends. I call them out all the time. You got Laura Ingraham and Sean Hannity. I will call them out night and day. But Judge Napolitano, Shep Smith, and Chris Wallace have continued to be above board. I have to be honest about that. And they're doing a good thing. Will it change the mind of Trump supporters? No, because they're not just there for the wall. Trump has delivered so much to them. He's given all these Trump supporters so much. He's given them defending white supremacists. He's defended men who abused women. He called Mexicans rapists. He talks about black people as dumb and unintelligent. He wants to ban Muslims. He wants to ban transgender Americans from the military. Promises made, promises kept. You want bigotry, racism, sexism? You've got it with Trump. This wall is a cherry on the sundae. They're not going anywhere. I'm just praising these guys for being journalists right to the end, and I appreciate that so much. So let's talk about the real thing. A House bill was passed last Thursday. Democrats came in. What is in this bill? So people understand that Democrats did vote for border security. In this bill, which has gotten coverage in broad brush but not in details, of the House bill, $1.3 billion Democrats voted for included new fencing in the Rio Grande Valley and funding to replace secondary fencing in San Diego. $366 million for border security technology. $7 million to hire, wait for it, 328 additional Customs and Border Customs officers. So $7 million to hire 328 more border guards. $224 million for non-intrusive inspection equipment. And $7 billion altogether for ICE. Now, people called in, some of the Trumpers have hung up before we got to it. They go, well, what would you do if you don't build a wall? Well, there are tons of things you can do for border security. If you want border security, we can get to that. That's not an issue. If you just want a wall because it makes you feel good and it soothes you so that brown people don't come into the country, that's different. And Congressman Cooler, a Democrat, though, from Texas, made it clear in an op-ed he wrote that the wall is a waste of our money. We should increase the use of modern technology, including cameras, fixed towers, aerial, and underground sensor. He said violent drug cartels are using modern technology to breach our border, and that we can't double down on a 14th century solution, being a wall, to a 21st century problem. He also goes on to say, guess what, folks? Customs border protection staffing shortages we've lost Border Patrol agents. It's gone down from 21,000 in 2011 down to 19,000 now. And here are nonpartisan people who have given proposals of what to do with the $5 billion Trump wants as opposed to a wall that would be more efficient for our tax dollars and make our border safer. Andrew Seeley, president of the Migration Policy Institute, a nonpartisan research center in D.C., said that the wall is a waste. We need more inspectors and surveillance equipment at the southwest points of entry because that's where most of the hard drugs come into our nation. Tony Payon, director of the Mexican Center at Baker Institute at Rice University, said, the wall is an almost absurd proposition. What we should do with the money, he said, would be best used on immigration courts that are now overwhelmed and with asylum seekers. Gil Kurkowski, former U.S. Customs and Border Protection Commissioner, now a professor at Northeastern, said use $2.5 billion of the $5 billion for a virtual fence, including cameras, sensors, satellite, and other surveillance. Use the other $2.5 billion to go to barriers, not a wall, but barriers in high traffic zones, and you in places where the structures are now failing or inadequate. The reality is, if you have an actually good faith conversation on border security, we can find ways to spend our tax dollars in an efficient way that will make our nation safer and not cost $25 to $30 billion as a starting point. When you get rid of all of Donald Trump's arguments, drugs and why immigrants, undocumented immigrants, how they actually get here and that they're bringing crime, and you destroy each of these, you're left with a few things. You're left with, is this A, about Trump's ego, B, vanity, C, white supremacy, D, all of the above. I don't see any other options because it's just not based in reality any longer. There's no reason to spend $25 to $30 billion on a wall. Donald Trump right now walked out of a meeting with the Democrats. He walked out. Mike Pence said he gave out candy to everyone. Both could be true. I could see Trump walking in, handing out candy and going, I want my wall. And they go, no. He's like, I'm out of here. Could have happened. But this is where we stand. And I just want to play quickly before we take a break. We'll come back to your calls. Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, just small responses from them to give them due. They were on right after Donald Trump. Here's first Nancy Pelosi. This is a little bit, 40 seconds of her response that I like, clip 5.
Sadly, much of what we heard from President Trump throughout this senseless shutdown has been full of misinformation and even malice. The president has chosen fear. We want to start with the facts. The fact is, on the very first day of this Congress, House Democrats passed Senate Republican legislation to reopen government and fund smart, effective border security solutions. But the president is rejecting these bipartisan bills, which would reopen government, over his obsession with forcing American taxpayers to waste billions of dollars on an expensive and ineffective wall, a wall he always promised Mexico would pay for.
Nice little dig there. I like that one at the end. And absolutely right. Senate Republicans, in fact, the entire Senate in middle December, voted by voice vote to fund the government without giving a penny to the border. Then that same exact bill was passed by the House Democrats last week. The only person causing a shutdown is Donald Trump, who will not sign that bill. Now, of course, it's got to be passed again in the Senate. That was the old Senate. But in any event, it passed voice vote with no opposition. And here's a quick clip by Chuck Schumer talking about the border crisis that I like, clip 6.
No president should pound the table and demand he gets his way, or else the government shuts down, hurting millions of Americans who are treated as leverage. Tonight, and throughout this debate and throughout his presidency, President Trump has appealed to fear, not facts, division, not unity. Make no mistake, Democrats and the president both want stronger border security. However, we sharply disagree with the president about the most effective way to do it.
So here's the bottom line. You could either listen to experts, Democrats, and Republicans like Congressman Will Hurd, a Republican from Texas who represents 800 miles of the border, who's made it very clear, and he's a former CIA undercover agent, that a wall is the most inefficient and most cost-ineffective way to secure our border. Or you can listen to Donald Trump. It's your choice. And if you just want to blindly listen to Donald Trump, then you're kidding yourself. There's no good faith in your conversation. If you want to secure the border, this is an easy one. There are ones that are not easy. This is an easy issue. Both Democrats and Republicans want to secure the border. It's a question of what's the most effective way with your tax dollars to do it. 25 to 30 billion for a wall is not. It's a non-starter. Democrats should not pay a penny for that. It's just like Trump going, I want 25 aircraft carriers. I think we have 10 right now. He goes, I want 25 to keep America safe. Each one's $12 billion. What would stop him from saying that? Nothing, except for that we're going to use our tax dollars, and it's not an efficient use of our dollars. There are other things that are efficient, but he won't talk about them. So, all right, let's take a break. I'd love to hear from you. 866-997-4748. Let me put it out there. What did you think of Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer's response? If you watched that, you probably didn't watch Trump's speech. Who cares? We know what he did. He lied. But at what point do you think Trump gets pressure by Republicans to finally say, open the government? There are Americans who are suffering because of you and your ego. He seems alone on Capitol Hill. It seems like no one's with him, but the Republicans in the Senate are timid cowards like field mice hiding. Let's take a break, come back. I'd love to hear from you right here on the Dean Obeidallah Show.
The Dean Obeidallah Show.
I think Trump clips that they play on the media should come with a health warning saying that if you watch this, you'll get dumber. Never has somebody said so much stupid in so little time as Donald Trump does.
SiriusXM Progress.